Hey BookTube, I'm back for another video, and I want to do a discussion video. Something that's been on my mind for a couple of months now, since I'm going into high school to teach English to a bunch of high school students. Part of the role, or I guess a lot of people would think of the primary role of an English teacher, is to teach students how to read a book. Not in the sense of like actually how to read, because in high school students should know how to read, but how to read a book and how to comprehend it and process it and interpret it. Because I'm a new high school teacher, and because I'm thinking a lot about this subject these days, I thought I would make a discussion video to see what you think on this subject, because I'm going to go through my own understanding using a dichotomy that I've come up with, and I'm just going to kind of present to you what my thinking is on this issue and open the door to any disagreement or any kind of further comments that you might have on the subject, and maybe I can learn a bit and further develop my thinking in this area. So the discussion I want to talk about is about whether or not or what approach you should take to teaching teaching literature to high school students. And there's two approaches that I've boiled it down to: critical reading and literary analysis. And I'm just going to go through each one and kind of give my thoughts and whatever on the subject, and I look forward to hearing what you think. And just as a preface before I dive into this, I want to make sure that I'm not going to be talking in highfalutin literary terms in the sense of like formalism and whatever, because I haven't had that kind of deep literary training, and I'll just be reading like a Wikipedia entry on formalism and giving you something that I've not really interacted with. So I'm just going off of purely based on my own understanding as someone who has gone through an undergraduate degree in English literature, who's done the necessary training to become an English teacher. I've taught Shakespeare. I've taught a novel study or two with different high school students, and I just want to know what would be the best approach. So I'm comparing literary analysis to critical reading. And I guess I'm going to go start off with a literary analysis. And so how I define literary analysis is more like a hermeneutical approach to a work of literature. And hermeneutical is, I guess, a fancy word. Not everyone's going to know what it means, but it's more just the process or the role of interpreting a text. And when I come to critical reading, I define it more as an objective evaluation of a work of literature. So I'm just going to work off of these definitions. I didn't even get these off of online or anything. These are just my own definitions off the top of my head. But literary analysis, like when you're looking at, interpreting a text, usually you focus on things like theme, symbol, language, characters, a narrative arc, and you're trying to determine what is the meaning of this text. So you're taking the text and you're trying to discern through all these different techniques, these literary techniques and strategies, trying to determine what does the text mean. This can include or can completely ignore like authorial intent. There's many different approaches to this. So for example, if you take the authorial intent into your role of interpretation, usually you're looking at like the author's biography, trying to determine what the author's state of life during this period in their life, and like for example, if you're looking at Moby Dick by Herman Melville, what was Herman Melville going through in his life at the time when he wrote Moby Dick? You're not looking at it just as a text within itself through this version of literary analysis. You're actually looking at the author's biography, what had gone up, what happened in his life previously that led to this moment of him having these ideas and executing the plan and writing Moby Dick. And then you can make a whole bunch of interpretations of the text through the author's biography. But there is also a literary analysis approach where you ignore completely the author of the text. This is usually called in literary circles like the death of the author, where you're purely looking at the text in itself. So the author has nothing to do with it. You're usually interpreting the text as the text itself, as it stands, and anything to do with the author is basically thrown out the window. So usually in this form of literary analysis, there's like different lenses or glasses of interpretation, like schools of thought that look at the text through their own ideology, I guess, for lack of a better term. So like a feminist look at Moby Dick or whatever, which would be kind of interesting since there's almost no women mentioned in that book. And I guess that would have a lot of feminist literary analysis would have a lot to say about that, and maybe about the role of masculinity and whatever. You can have a Marxist interpretation of a text. You can have a critical theory interpretation, or a post-colonial, or Freudian. All these different kinds of interpretations or approaches to a text, and you try to glean meaning from the text through that lens. Like, what is the text? What can the text say about a post-colonial, through a post-colonial lens? So usually this approach, either through authorial intent or not, just general literary analysis through interpretation. I have my notes here, that's what I'm looking down for. I couldn't do this video purely off the top of my head. I would be too disjointed, so it's just having some notes to guide me. But when you're looking at taking a look at a text, you're not concerned with any objective measure of the text. So I'll get into that when I dive into critical reading. But in a literary analysis, you're not concerned about whether the book is good or bad. You're only concerned about finding meaning within the text. And so think of biblical analysis. That would be, especially with the use of the term hermeneutics, is like you're not determining whether or not books of the Bible are good or bad or whatever. You're looking for themes and interpretations of meaning through different repetition of words or places, or the construction of the narrative, the pacing, whatever. But this is only to find a general overall meaning, trying to give meaning to what is being done, and you can also, and then you can take this approach from the Bible, because most religious hermeneuticals is not going to criticize the Bible per se. I mean, it also depends on your background and your approach to it, but you can take that approach and then you apply it to literature. So when we look at The Great Gatsby, we're looking at all the different symbols that he throws in, and what do these symbols mean, and how does that add meaning to the text, and how does that help us interpret whatever the text is trying to say, the text or the author, because sometimes people like to divide those. And I guess to wrap up literary analysis here, I guess the main folly or pitfall of this version of analysis, or looking at a text through just pure interpretation, literary analysis, is that it can lead to a lot of nonsense, a lot of just made up, I don't want to say speculation because that's a bit of a overreach, but it can lead to just a lot of nonsense interpretations. One of the examples that is seared in my mind, and I absolutely hate it, and because I hate it, I'm going to constantly repeat it on this channel so that I drag you with me. I mentioned it in a previous video that I was reading a book on the analysis of Tolkien's work, and one of the chapters is like a Fortean analysis of The Hobbit, and he mentions how the Bag End, which is Bilbo's house, is like a womb figure, or like a womb in which to go on an adventure, Bilbo has to leave the womb, the comforts and the safety of the womb, to go on this adventure, and he calls the the door to Bag End as the vagina of Bag End. And that kind of interpretation, that's literary analysis, literary interpretation, because you know for a fact that Tolkien would have started a fist fight with whoever had started that interpretation, because that is not his intention, that is not something that he would sign off on, and I don't blame him. I don't really want that's no. So you can see like a lot of nonsense is kind of approach in here, and I guess an example here. Well, I'll get to some more examples when I go into critical reading. So let's dive into critical reading now. So critical reading, to remind you, is an objective analysis. An objective analysis of a work of literature. And I'm saying literature here, you can do this for nonfiction too, but literary analysis doesn't really work for nonfiction as well, or at least I don't have as much experience in it. And so when I'm comparing the two, I'm comparing it in the realms more of just fiction. So when you're looking at a critical evaluation of a work of literature, you're looking at an objective analysis, and just as a parenthetical, the term critical has taken on different meanings. So when I say critical thinking or critical reading, that has it has changed, flipped meanings in the last while. So where I mean it as objective analysis, there is a realm of thought that's like critical theory, like critical race theory. They think of critical in terms of as more of like a literary analysis, but critical analysis. So you're looking at things in terms of bias, diversity, and equity, and analysis of prejudice. So this would be very different from what I'm defining as critical reading, as in terms of objective evaluation, because the critical theory version of critical thinking or critical reading rejects objectivity. There is no possibility of objective analysis. What they are doing is that they are basically one of the lenses, I guess. Like you have the Freudian, the feminist, the Marxist. Well, critical theory, critical race theory, that's just another lens through which they would read a text, and they would look for it, like for, you know, anti-racism, equity, diversity, bias, whatever, prejudice. So just a parenthetical, this is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the more traditional look at critical as an objective analysis. So with an objective analysis, the author intent only matters so much as the author's construction of their work on the page. So what are the author's choices in how they construct their text? The author clearly made choices. Are they good choices? Are the choices lazy? Are the choices uneven? So an example here would be like, so a question here, is this character gay, is not determined based on an interview the author gives. So the author cannot say this character is gay if in the text itself there's no evidence that the character is in fact gay. So if the question of authorial intent here is only purely what's given in the text. So when the author wrote the book, what do they give inside the text? What do we know about this character? Is this character gay or not? That's the only approach that a critical reading would look at. They wouldn't care that the author goes around in their podcast and book readings talking about how this character is gay when the book doesn't actually reflect that. They only care about what the book actually reflects and the authorial intent around that. So, and then critical reading, it looks at so when I said a literary analysis, it looks at theme and symbol and languages and character and narrative arc. Um, Critical reading kind of looks at some of the same things, but looks at them differently. So it looks at pacing and plot structure, looks at character arcs, looks at word choice and dramatic set pieces, and the purpose here is to determine what is working and what does not work. Like, what is the author trying to do, and are they successfully pulling off what they're trying to do? And if what they're trying to do is well done, or maybe what they're trying to do isn't very sophisticated, but maybe they do certain scenes very well, despite that. So you're looking for what, trying to determine the purpose of the pacing, the purpose of certain character arcs. Are some characters more, or like, is our main character a flat character? That's going to affect the reading experience, because usually when we go to literature, we're looking for a character we can connect to, and we're looking for evidence of change throughout the book. And is the author maybe obvious with this change, or is there no change at all, or is the change quite subtle? So then moving on to like the overall question here. The overall question is not to derive meaning no matter what. The question here is to determine, is this particular book worth one's time? And this can lead to controversial opinions, because if you always look things at through a literary analysis lens, and this is usually dominant throughout high school and university, you're too busy looking at all the delicious symbols and, say, The Great Gatsby, to really take a step back and determine, is this book really good? And critical reading is looking at that. Is this book successful? Is it good? And they would maybe notice that the symbols and the theme in The Great Gatsby are maybe obvious, or maybe the author's slapping you in the face with them, and maybe that makes the book not as good as maybe someone who only looks at it purely through interpretation might think, because, well, when we're looking at things for interpretation, literary analysis can really like obvious interpretations, at least in the realm of teaching, when you have to teach this to a bunch of disgruntled high school students. The obviousness of literary analysis, or of symbols and whatever, can really recommend itself as a text that you want to teach it to students. Here, I guess an example is from a book that I'm reading Dracula by Bram Stoker, and I just finished chapter 5. And if you've read this book before, you'll know that the first 4 chapters are the journal entry of a character named Jonathan, I think Jonathan Hark, or Jonathan Harkin or something. We get his journal entries as he goes to this Count Dracula's castle and ends up being trapped, and discovers a whole bunch of very creepy, supernatural type happenings in this book, in this castle. And and at the very end, we get this dramatic, at the end of chapter 4, we get this very dramatic ending scene where he knows that he's probably going to die during the night if he stays put and doesn't do anything, and so he makes this last-ditch attempt to escape the castle through a window. And it's very exciting. It's the stakes are a lot higher. But then chapter 5 is very different. We all of a sudden get a bunch of journal entries from other characters that we haven't been introduced to, and they're very mundane, about like engagements, and about one's job prospects, and about just these characters writing letters. And through a literary interpretation, you are looking at what is the meaning of this sudden change and shift in narrative between these journal entries that are wrapping up to a climax to all of a sudden mundane family matters. Um, and But a critical interpretation would look at these and not so much look at what is Bram Stoker trying to mean with this, like what is and how does it reflect in the overall novel. Though they can ask those questions, but the question they're more interested in is how effective is this change in narrative. We're thrilled up all the way up to the end of chapter 4. Does this sudden shift in narrative affect the author's, affect the reader's enjoyment of the text, and does it actually fit within the overall arc of the novel? Like, is there a clear reason for this that the author pays off later on, or is it just the author being a little bumbly and dropping the ball at a very dramatic point in the text? And those, I guess, are the kinds of questions, the kinds of lenses through which these different, or at least not lenses, I guess, would be the end goal, the different end goals of these different approaches. So you got the critical reading is looking for the objective point of view, the literary analysis looking to extract a lot of blood from the stones of the words of the author. And I guess my last question to end off this video is, like, which approach do you usually take, or do you take any of these approaches at all? But most of all, which approach would be best for a high school classroom? That is my question, because I guess this is my first time really thinking through this. Like, it wasn't until I guess you see these two different perspectives where which one is, and you look at the values of each one of them, like the literary analysis, there's a lot of nonsense that can be brought in that way, and the critical reading one is something that I guess I lack a little bit in, because I wasn't really taught it. It's something that is fairly new to me as an approach, and something that I guess I really don't feel like I have a lot of grounds for confidence in, especially to teach a text in a critical reading style to students, and whether or not this would be of worth. Do I really want to teach them to read this way, and we're reading The Great Gatsby and they determine that it's a bad book? Or do I rather try to just teach them a literary analysis approach to that book, and then we can, get all juicy over the symbols or whatever. So what is the best approach for an English class, at least as a priority means? I mean, you could easily just say both, but that's not that easy because you only have so much time, and these approaches are fairly different enough that it's important to at least have one dominant style in which to teach. But maybe I'm wrong in that way, considering I have not taught a full course, full couple-month, English course myself. But anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I really wanted to hear what your thinking is on this issue, or what is your interaction with literary analysis. What do you think of it? Is it an approach that you like? Same thing with critical reading. What is your history with it, and what do you think of that approach? And just excuse my rambling. I know I don't think I've been as clear as I hoped. I'm just glad that I was at least semi-coherent, and thanks to my notes. But I'm going to leave it there, and I look forward to any responses. Thank you, BookTube.